Hey guys, in this video I'm going to be pretty much giving my 2 cents on why I'm ditching Appcelerator Titanium. And I wanted to start this off by saying that I'm not officially against Titanium, I'm not advocating a new platform, and I'm not trying to sway anyone's opinion, but if you're looking for an opinion, um, here's mine. So I've been using Appcelerator Titanium for about 5 years, I think since they started, or roughly around the time that they started. So I'm not someone who's just used it for a couple of weeks and then made a conclusion. Anyway, I have five reasons why I decided recently to stop using Appcelerator Titanium. So here they are. Reason number one is speed, and I mean speed in three contexts. So the first context is the loading time and the runtime speed of Appcelerator Studio that they're calling it now. And a little bit of history. Maybe if you've just started using Appcelerator, you're not familiar with the history of it, but back in the day, around 2010, which is roughly when I started using it, they had an application called Titanium Developer, which was really just a compiler. It was lightweight. You could use whatever code editor you wanted, and all Titanium Developer did was to compile your application for the iTunes Store for distribution to a device or for testing in the emulator or simulator. And that ran pretty well. I mean, how many code editors are there already out there? You know, do we really need another one? I thought that was great. But now with Titanium Studio and now we have Appcelerator Studio, they're really laggy, I find. You know, I mean, I'm not using a supercomputer, but I'm not using a dodgy Celeron either. And yeah, you know, I'm not really satisfied with how smoothly it loads and how smoothly it runs and so on. I'm talking about the IDE in this case. Number two, within the context of speed, is compile time. So I tried to compile something the other day and it took like 8 minutes to compile something for the iOS simulator. And 8 minutes of compile time for a simple application to me is too much. I don't want to wait 8 minutes every time I want to test an application. And this may or may not be Appcelerator's fault because I mean I noticed, especially after I think Xcode 5, it got really bad. So not being a native iOS developer myself, I don't know how it compares, you know, compiling natively in Xcode compared to compiling in Appcelerator Studio. But you know, that's another notch that's, you know, affecting my experience using Appcelerator Studio. So compile times are ridiculous. They're a little better on Android, especially after Genymotion came out. If you're not using Genymotion, you should be. That's a much faster Android emulator than the default emulator. But even then, but especially for iOS, it's really slow. Compiling. Reason number three within the context of speed is runtime speed. That is your application runtime speed. And a lot of, you know, whoever's watching this is probably thinking, we already knew that, you know, going with a mobile platform, you're gonna, you know, lose a little bit of performance compared to developing natively. Yeah, we know that, but even for a simple game, like recently I was making a Mario clone, or kind of a Mario clone, and I didn't even have enemies on the, you know, in the application yet. I just had the platforms where Mario stands and doesn't fall through. I had the Mario sprite. I had the boxes that he can jump on and doing and get a coin. And even then, it was not really performing to expectation. Like on an iPod, it wasn't running very well. Even on an iPhone 6, it wasn't running as smoothly as I would have expected. And that's even after making some optimizations, like combining all of the unbreakable boxes in one sprite and having that as one view. And it's easy to turn around and say, oh, you know, your programming sucks. But I mean, I'm noticing a direct correlation between how many views there are in the application and how laggy it is. So I'm thinking it has more to do with how Titanium handles view objects behind the scenes. There is, of course, a game development module on the marketplace, but it costs like $300 to $350. So for an indie developer who's going to release something for free, if at all, $350 is not something that I want to pay. Reason number two would be compile errors. And before you say, oh, this guy's a noob, you should take a look on Stack Overflow and on the Appcelerator Titanium community forum, and just take a look over the years how many people have posted a question on this topic. You get some kind of inexplicable compile error from Titanium that most of the time has nothing to do with your code. And the solutions range typically from clear your project and close Titanium, open it up again, uninstall Titanium, reinstall it, and some other workarounds like that, which is really the equivalent of have you tried turning it off and on again. And the real worrying thing there is this isn't just something specific to, Appcelerator like over 1 month or something like that. These sort of problems have been happening for me since the beginning. They're not, crippling to your project, but they're just annoying that you have to deal with. So you can work around them, but they're just annoying. They have nothing to do with your code. Your code has no syntax errors, or there shouldn't be any linker errors unless you're using modules or something like that. But I'm not talking about those circumstances. I'm talking about circumstances where everything is perfect, but Titanium will not compile your project for some stupid reason. You have to clear the project or close it and open it again. Practical example: a few days ago, I opened up Appcelerator Studio again after a couple months of not using it, and I was trying to compile a project for iTunes Sync, and after 8 minutes of compile time, it spat back at me, "You do not have an AWWDR certificate installed, Apple Worldwide Developer Certificate," or something like that, installed. But I knew for a fact that I did, and I googled it, and I found on Stack Overflow a solution saying first you have to build for iOS Simulator, then you can build for iTunes Sync without getting that compile error. Why? There's no reason for that. There's no good reason to have that. And they just take up extra time. They suck up extra time, and they're just extra headache. On top of the complexity of your application, which may or may not be complex, then you have to deal with these these stupid errors, compile errors that prevent your program from compiling for no good reason. So that's reason number two. Reason number three would be platform instability issues. So to explain what I mean by that, if you go back to 2010, Appcelerator had two SDKs. They had the mobile SDK and they had the desktop SDK. Both SDKs were compilable using their product Titanium Developer. Then you fast forward and they decided for some reason that they didn't just want a compiler, they wanted an IDE. So they modded Aptana Studio, which was just like a web development IDE. And then they made Titanium Studio out of that. And that was okay. I didn't need an IDE. I was perfectly happy using Sublime or Notepad++, but not a big deal. Then they decided to drop the desktop SDK, which for me was a big deal because I had written some commercial software using their desktop SDK. Thankfully, at least for a little while, the desktop SDK got picked up by an open source group, and they called it Tide SDK. TI Titanium DE Desktop SDK, and that was running okay for a while, but even that went dead, and now an independent company led by one of the founders of the open source group is porting that into a commercial product that you now have to pay for. So that commercial software that I've written is now pretty much dead. Here's hoping that I don't have to update it anytime soon. Otherwise I'd have to rebuild it from scratch probably, or somehow port it to a web app would be the best thing. Anyway, so you've got that, and then they've done away with their Python backend and introduced a Node.js backend, which didn't really affect me very much, but that's another change. They went and added CommonJS, they went and added Alloy as different project types, which are good, but as far as Alloy is concerned, in my opinion, it's really just adding more inconsistency between Titanium projects. So you'll have an Alloy project, you'll have a legacy old school Titanium project, you'll have a CommonJS project, you'll have heaps, and all of them are more or less incompatible with the way their UIs are constructed and things like that. Anyway, then you've got what they included Arrow, and then they included Appcelerator Studio. They went from Titanium Studio to Appcelerator Studio, and now you have to pay for using Appcelerator Studio. Previous developers, like myself, got a free indie seat, which was good, but that's a lot of change. Recently, too, Appcelerator was just bought out by another company, and they say that it's not going to change, but I mean, it's changed so much already over the 5 years under Appcelerator, so I really have no idea how it's going to change in the future. Who knows what's going to happen? And that's that. Reason number 4 is, again, this may or may not be an Appcelerator issue, but since I'm only using Appcelerator Titanium, I don't really know otherwise. I noticed especially recently, whenever I update the operating system on my device, be it Android or iPhone, it will cause a problem with an app that I've made using Appcelerator Titanium. Either the app will launch and then crash immediately, or certain UI components don't work the way they used to, or there will be some kind of problem with it. And again, this may be happening to the native guys as well. I don't know that it's not, but it's definitely happening to me. Not all of the time, but with, I'd say, the majority of applications that I've written recently, the new OS update on the device has caused problems with it, which is just annoying because the application was working fine. It didn't have any issues, no known bugs, no problem. It was a simple application. We're not talking crazy complex stuff. And just because the OS updated, I now have to, in a lot of the cases, just recompile the application and redistribute it. I don't have to change the code at all. So it's got nothing to do with the application logic. It's something to do with how it was compiled or whatever. I don't know that that's Appcelerator's fault, but I don't know that it's not. And lucky last, reason number 5 for me leaving Appcelerator Titanium, ditching it for something else, is actually speed of development, which sounds funny because one of the main selling points of Appcelerator Titanium and the other platforms, Corona and PhoneGap and all that, is supposed to be speed of development. And when you compare Appcelerator Titanium to developing natively, when it comes to the backend logic, especially if you're going to be making an application for multiple platforms, yes, it makes sense that using Appcelerator Titanium will save you time, because you don't have to write your backend logic in Objective-C or Swift and Java and whatever the Windows Phone guys are using and blah blah blah, BlackBerry SDK, etc., etc. But what I find and what I've found is that whenever I write an Appcelerator Titanium app, I spend most of my time constructing the interface, which for more of a backend guy really doesn't sound that great. I shouldn't be doing that. So what I would really, really like is a set of templates that I can use. Even something like Bootstrap, where you can pick up a template, either the sort of wireframe template or a themed template or something like that, and have a basic UI, a basic interface that I can then add on, just add my event listeners to and add the backend logic to and customize a little bit to get it to look the way I want. Or something like templatemo.com, which has a bunch of free HTML, CSS templates, something like that for Alloy or for CommonJS with Appcelerator would save me so much time and so much headache, because I mean, it doesn't really make sense for me to be constructing interfaces from scratch anyway. And especially without anything, without even like Bootstrap style example templates that you can pick up. I mean, you might say, oh, there is the kitchen sink, but the kitchen sink is really just one user interface type which throws everything in there, hence the kitchen sink. And even that, occasionally hasn't compiled for some people according to the community forums and Stack Overflow. So that's, again, supporting my compilation grievance. And that's basically it. So my 5 reasons as to why I'm ditching Appcelerator Titanium. What am I going to be using next as my platform of choice for building mobile apps? I'm thinking I might talk about that in another video because this one's already getting a bit lengthy. But yeah, I'm not really trying to diss Appcelerator, and I'm not trying to sway anybody's opinion, but if you wanted the opinion of somebody who's been working with their products for about 5 years, here it is. So thanks for watching. Feel free to leave a comment or get in touch, and I'll catch you later. See ya.